Seeking answers to age-old questions, deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. A big, huge, massive warm welcome to this, the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning edition of the Kev Baker Show, right here on your favourite network, www.truthfrequencyradio.com. It's an absolute pleasure to be broadcasting to all you fine people out there tonight. And tonight we have got one of our most special shows lined up yet. But before we get there, it wouldn't be any show at all without my two regular co-hosts and buddies, Johnny Whistles and Big Martin Hardy. I'm going to come to you first. Whistles, how are you doing, man? And I know you're uber excited about tonight's guest.
Oh, no wonder, Kev. You know what I mean? I can remember way back at the start when I was joking to you to get him on as a guest, and wow, just fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. And before we get to that, if people don't know, I'm going to go to Marty Boy to do the honours in the chat. But before we go to the chat, Marty, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing great, guys. Just can't wait to hear this next half of the show.
Excellent. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to even the first half of the show as well, because there's been so much going on in the world. We had been expecting the Ukraine boy, Alex, to come on. And I really hope Alex is okay, because that country is slipping into bedlam more and more every day. So a big shout out to Alex and anyone over in the Ukraine right now. We are all thinking of you. You're all victims of a globalist overthrow of a democratically elected government. And I was hoping we could have Alex on to speak about this tonight. But we'll get him on as soon as we can, and he'll bring us right up to date with the real news that's coming out of Kiev. And in the second half of the show, our guest will be kind of angling his talk towards what's going on over there. But Marty, we can't go anywhere until you've done the chat room, man.
Yeah, thanks very much. Big shout out to everyone in the chat room tonight and further afield, whether you're there or not. If you're not, come and join us at truthfrequencyradio.com. 50 people so far. Shout out to Naughty Boy, Alpha Dog, Andy, Angel Whisperism, Ozzy and Zach, Cheryl, Cows in Nappies, David GK, Denin Oldham, our very own Popeye, Flower Child, Harold, Ivy Nurse, Kevin John, Chris, McGrinder, Miss Susie Q, Mitty Boosh, Nosboy, Noteworthy Icon, Sofa King, Stushi, the one and only Temp, Truth Samurai, Wandernator, Dr. Haruwino, a load of fan, Jujusif, Ibrahim, and a whole host of anons. Couple of plants in there, nearly caught me out. Nice try.
Excellent. And Marty, can I just get you to hang up and I'll reconnect quickly, because I think you're actually hosting the call at the moment, just so we get that uber good connection from my end, okay? So if you could hang up, I'll reconnect right away. I think we might even have lost Marty. There we are back, folks. Look at that, the joys of modern technology. A show this is going to be tonight. And in part 2 of this show, it gives me immense pleasure to announce that we are going to be playing a recorded interview that myself and John conducted yesterday with the publisher of the world-famous Trends Journal himself, Mr. Gerald Celente. Now, unfortunately, Marty, you couldn't actually be there for last night, but I've made sure that Mr. Celente is going to come on again in the future, and you certainly will get to speak to him as well, man.
Yeah, thanks very much. It will be a pleasure. Just can't wait to hear what he has to say, you know, and the whole context with you guys, it'll be something else.
And Marty, it's like Whistles says, we really did. Whistles used to say jokingly at the start, if we could get Gerald Celente, then we really know that we've arrived in the alternative media. And I've said it to you, Martin, I've said it to Johnny Whistles. The moment we arrived in alternative media was when somehow Chris Geo seen fit to give us the chance to be on here in the first place. And it's only thanks to TFR, Chris Geo, Joe Joseph, Popeye, everyone else behind the scenes, and the listening audience out there, that we are able to go and ask for guests such as Celente come on and speak to you. But before we get there, let's get into this plethora of news that we have for you today. And unfortunately, folks, things in the Middle East have yet again taken a turn for the worst.
This was an attack that took place in the Hanof area in the west of Jerusalem as there were worshippers going to a synagogue inside a Jewish seminary early in the morning. 2 Palestinian men entered, we understand, armed with knives, with an axe, shooting at those inside. 4 Israelis were killed. Israeli police then came. There was an exchange of fire with the Israeli police, and the 2 suspects were killed. The police have sealed off this area. Some still quite chaotic scenes there. A number of people have been injured and taken to hospital, including 2 police officers, we're told. And really, this is just going to add to the tensions in Jerusalem, which have been simmering for weeks now, with a few other attacks that have taken place in Jerusalem, in the east of the city, also in the West Bank, in Tel Aviv. A total of 6 Israelis killed by Palestinians in those. But this is really the deadliest attack that there has been in Jerusalem, the deadliest attack of its kind for many years.
So there you go, folks. What's happened is we had an attack at a synagogue in Jerusalem today. Just the latest event in a whole spate of events that have been going on. Now, this has been blamed on 2 Palestinians who carried knives, axes. I believe 1 handgun was involved. One thing I do want to point out to the listeners out there, it's the usual story when it comes to the mainstream, folks. In the initial moments after this attack, we had both Sky News and it was the BBC reporting that there may be a 3rd gunman on the loose, a 3rd attacker. Now, this 3rd attacker miraculously just disappeared after about an hour or so in the mainstream cycle. And I'm wondering, just part of me just wonders if this could be some kind of set-up situation. And Marty, I want to come to you first because we were talking before the show, and it really is. It's total insanity if this is Palestinians going and doing this and expecting anything other than all hell being released on their people.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, after what just happened a couple of months back there, it seems stupid, to go out and commit acts like that because, how many kids are now going to have to die at the hands of airstrikes, because of this sort of scenario, if it is a genuine scenario, but I mean, it just doesn't help. It's just like war breeding war, and I just don't believe that this is just your average Palestinian. If it is that, I think there's something deeper going on here. We're actually seeing all over the social media and even the news and stuff reporting on it that there's various pro-Hamas groups putting cartoons out there, and you can imagine what's happening in the cartoon, but basically glorifying the events of today. And Netanyahu has come out and said that there'll be harsh consequences. So again, how many children have to die at the hands of these violent acts,
A very good point. And to give himself some kind of political cover this time round, in my opinion, we are seeing a dangerous trend. And this trend involves the news and the IDF spokespeople associating the Palestinians with ISIS. They are mentioning the 2 in the same sentence every 2 sentences or so. And Johnny Whistles, I'm just worried that, as I said before, this may be used as some kind of political cover for another bombardment on an already bombed out Gaza Strip. And why I say that is because they can go in there under the guise of fighting the war on terror. No matter how ridiculous that is, John.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Kev, usually anything we hear, you can't take it as gospel, anything that comes out of Israel, because what they've said is they said that they were dancing in the streets and the kids were giving out sweets and candy and stuff. But they've also accused the Palestinian president of actually praising this. But he's come out in a statement saying that he condemns the attack no matter who did it. But another thing that they didn't tell you about was the day before there was a Palestinian bus driver found in his own bus, hanged. They said it was suicide. We just don't know what's going on in the background, Kev, because we get to hear nothing. It's only what the Israelis want to tell us.
Yeah. Exactly, John. And Marty, you were telling me that there's actually been more settlements springing up, and Gaza, we were told that there was billions of pounds being sent there to repair the place. It's still lying in ruin.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's so much going on right now and so much tension over there. It's not funny, 50,000 homes destroyed in Gaza, and still to this date they won't let any construction material in to begin repairs. Then over on the West Bank, the settlements have been on the rise. More and more people moving into them and, occupying the land and stuff, which actually should belong to the people of the West Bank there. So again, there's a lot of tensions, and I think this all started with a hit and run over in the West Bank a couple of months back, in which some Palestinian children were actually run over, allegedly by a Jewish person, and then the next day or the day after, there was a Palestinian person drove a car into a load of Jewish people, and it's just been tit for tat like that, and like Johnny was saying, the bus driver that were found there suicided. So, I mean, when's it going to end? Surely the people would evolve through all this war and everything that's happened and learn from the mistakes, which leads me to believe that Israel, the aggressor, is in some way stimulating this stuff and could be the bigger man and say enough's enough and give the people, the rights to repair the cities, and live like everyone else lives in the world,
And Marty, we spoke to Max Egan a good couple of times during that last conflict, and it was the world were outraged for once. The world were voicing concerns about the Palestinian people, but Max brought to light the plan for the genocide of the entire Palestinian people and the reclaiming of that land. And that operation that just went, it came and gone, but the plan remains. So like you say, this could well be some kind of contrived event just to get that going again.
Yeah, I mean, we had it happen a couple of years ago and then back a couple of months ago. So who's to say, that this might be a regular thing now? Maybe kill a couple of thousand Palestinians every couple of months, every year or so, and then eventually lead the rest to just sheer poverty and death anyway, It sounds very sick and far-fetched, but you can really see the effects of it, from the last 50, 60 years, what's been going on over there. And let's not forget, it was, all stemmed through British colonialism. So Britain's no saint in this whole Zionist agenda, if I'm honest.
No, definitely not. And when the world looks at the American military going away and fighting in all these different countries for all these different reasons, don't ever forget that the chances are they're acting on the orders of our Queen. We have the City of London here, the banking elite. Don't ever lose sight of how powerful that square mile in the centre of London is, folks. That really is one of the power centres. I always look at the likes of Rome as being the religious arm, London, the monetary and the royal side of it, and then you have the Pentagon in Washington and that military side of the New World Order cabal. Just my own opinion of it. And this New World Order cabal, their favourite tool to use at the moment is, of course, ISIS. We mentioned them there. And then one other story that came out today, which has laid the pretext for getting ground troops into Syria, something that we have spoke about umpteen times on this show. We've had US President Barack Obama for the first time admitting that he would deploy US ground troops to Syria and Iraq to fight the Islamic State. That is, if the extremist group obtained a nuclear weapon. Now, he is quoted as saying, if we discover that the Islamic State has gotten possession of a nuclear weapon and we had to run an operation to get it out of their hands, then yes, Obama told reporters at a news conference in Brisbane, I would order it. Now, again, this has always been the plan. They need to get into Syria. They tried and failed with a fake false flag allegedly carried out by Assad, a chemical attack on his own people. We all seen through that. We managed to fight that one down. In no small part down to Vladimir Putin. We managed to stave off that threat. But here we are again now, amidst airstrikes, ISIS, Yazidis stuck up mountains, and we have now been given the actual criteria for troops on the ground. And Marty, Jono, if they can find a WMD in Iraq, fair play to them, because I'm pretty sure we're still looking after all these years.
Very true, very true.
I mean, Marty, if they get their hands on a nuclear weapon, it would had to have come from us. We were only talking the other night with Whistles about an alleged broken arrow, a missing warhead from Dias Air Force Base. How in heck's name could ISIS get their hands on a nuclear warhead unless it was via one of these, air quotes, accidental airdrops right into ISIS territory?
Yeah, well, they seem to be doing very well in terms of finances and stuff. They could probably buy some offshore, I suppose.
And Marty, was you
How
not...
many times? Sorry, how many times have they done that? They were supposed to be dropping food into the Yazidis, and they dropped food into ISIS. They dropped arms into ISIS as well. And the funny thing is, the last time that Barack Obama gave one of those red line statements, it was only about a week after that they used these chemical weapons against the Syrians. So,
John, the way I look at these airdrops, and I really do think there's something in this, I think the ones that we hear about, these accidents that we're referring to, they're the ones that either genuine Iraqis or Syrians or actually these embedded reporters have actually seen, and they cannot deny them. So they have to kind of get it out of the way and just say, well, that was a mistake. Because let's face it, when you can actually land a probe up on a flying comet 300 million miles away, are you telling me you can't airdrop food and supplies to your own troops in a desert?
great point, Kev. Great point.
It's just my own thoughts on it. And John, we're in Scotland right now. And you know Scotland, we became famous for something new today, John. Do you know what that is?
Oh, what's that?
We are the gateway for jihadis entering the fight in Syria and Iraq. Yes, that is right. The Daily Fail, my toilet paper of choice, its front page headline in Scotland today, Scotland, gateway for jihadis. That's right, they are coming up here from England now that Gatwick and Heathrow are so secure and they can't get out of there without being tracked. What they do is they come to Glasgow Airport. Didn't work so well for them the last time, if memory serves me correctly, but they join a queue full of Scottish people who are also determined to go abroad and burn themselves. But hey, the comedy continues, Johnny.
Wow. Wow, Kev.
And you know,
how bad is that?
That joke might have been lost on some people out there, but John, I mean, it's probably the wrong time of year, but when Scottish people go to an airport in the summer, 9 times out of 10, we are flying abroad to set fire to ourselves. We want to see that thing they call the sun.
Exactly, Kev.
Dangerous terrorists.
My God. So you
So-
go holiday now. Oh,
Well, if ISIS doesn't scare you,
Oh.
and Ebola doesn't, Marty,
Don't move on from ISIS.
on you go, man.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal came out 2 days ago. I wanted to bring this up, and the title was Jihadonomics. And basically, in a statement translated by Site Intelligence, yes, our Mossad friends there, they're saying that Islamic State terrorists say that they're going to mint their own gold and silver and basically create a new currency.
Oh, give me peace.
yeah, I've seen that as well. It's gold, silver and copper.
What are they going to have? 72 jihadis to the pound? Oh.
More than $1 billion in cash reserves. Yeah, you can see how allegedly. But,
Right, so hang on a minute. These guys who are jumping about the desert in brand new Toyotas and black pyjamas, they've all of a sudden got themselves now a printing press and enough gold to start printing coins and things? What's happening here, Johnny Whistles?
Not only that, just think, if they join the BRICS nations, that would become BRICSIS.
Or just is BRICS?
Could be, Kev.
It's
Oh, they've got enough
actually,
money to join it now anyway.
you know what, I
supposedly.
hope the listeners are catching on to the fact why we're having such a laugh with this. Because it is really becoming that ridiculous now that even the most asleep person in the world must see that there is something far wrong. I've just seen Federal Jack in the chat room. Big
Hey.
shout out to Popeye there. Absolutely huge shout out to you, man. Big respect. But yeah, this is becoming absolutely farcical. Printing their own money, getting a hold of nukes. Coming to Scotland again? That would never happen. But while all this is going on, over in Ferguson, in Missouri, we're getting ready for another riot. Listen to this.
They know the makeup of the city. They know the neighborhoods better. They know people in our city better. They feel much more comfortable here in our city of St. Louis, protecting our neighborhoods. The National Guard comes from all over the state of Missouri. Some of them have, direct local law enforcement, maybe military, police experience. But many of them don't have experience, with protests and peaceful protests like our police officers do. We are going to be prepared from a law enforcement standpoint to make sure that people and properties are safe, as well as the protesters, demonstrators who have an opportunity to express their First Amendment rights and to protest in a peaceful way. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we're going to have the resources necessary in the event there is any kind of violence or anything.
In the event that there's any kind of violence, there is certainly going to be violence. Now, you just listened there to the voice of Mayor Francis Slay. Now, he is the mayor of St. Louis, and he has said that local police should take the lead in dealing with any protests, and the National Guard need only serve a background role. Johnny Whistles, Marty, we're having the National Guard rolled out in advance on the verdict to indict the police officer who shot dead Michael Brown. Now, I personally think that riots are a foregone conclusion, whether it's they're going to try the cop or not. I really do think these riots are pre-planned, and what they're going to do is you'll have a lot of agent provocateurs in there. You've got your Black Panther groups, you've got all these different groups, and what will happen is the local police will be overwhelmed. They will not be able to cope with this, and that will provide the perfect justification with all the scenes of Molotov cocktails and buildings burning for the MRAPs and the federalised police and all the basically militarised police to roll out in St. Louis. And if it should spread further afield, what do you guys think on that?
Well, Kev, the day you can tell that something's going down in the background, because today there was a guy had asked, and I'm sure it was the chief of police, who was actually in charge of things in Ferguson, and he'd done a 15-minute rabble of going round about the question. He won't even say who's in charge. Either that, or he doesn't know. But I think that there's things in the background that's ready to happen in Ferguson, and it's all about to kick off, mate. I fear for something really happening bad there.
Yeah, same here. I really do fear for that. And, we always but it seems that we spend the majority of our time when we speak about the police on this show. Unfortunately, we're highlighting the darker aspects of the police. Now, not all police are bad, but for some of the police who are nefarious and who do have bad intentions and who are not there to uphold their oath or protect the people, there's something called Cop Watch that we need to watch out for. Now, Marty, I've just got a quick clip here, but if you want to jump in just now, man, that's cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say in regards to the Ferguson thing real quick before we run out of time, there's also a lot of racial tensions rising. Members of the KKK and various other Aryan groups have been making threats to actually, go down and get involved and stuff. So, yeah, I'd say watch this space, but for anyone actually living out there, don't fall short, and don't buy into the phony provocateur stuff.
Definitely, Marty, well said. And for these provocateur events, and to keep an eye on the local cops, have a listen to this.
Well, it is more than 100 days since the killing of Michael Brown right here. There were tributes left here immediately after the event, and there are more being added even to this day. And we are expecting an announcement very soon as to whether or not the police officer involved is going to be indicted, and both the authorities and people of this area are preparing for what could be, once again, a very difficult time for Ferguson. But there are some local groups who are taking a long-term view and looking at how they might protect themselves against what they see as police harassment.
The police might just come right through here, through the back way, 2 or 3 cars deep.
As part of an organisation called Cop Watch, David Witt's been educating his neighbours in their rights and how to monitor and record interactions with the police.
You know, and if the police engages in a manner that's not befitting of an officer, then, bam, we have a camera we can record. We actually have body cameras. We've given out 110 of these body cameras to people in the area just so people can have a tool to cut on. They see the cops, we say, look, just cut your camera on.
If there's no indictment, what do you think is going to happen?
That's the $1 million question. I wish I knew the answer, man. I just hope that, you know, our government really takes a real strong look at the process that's going on here. You know, this is bigger than Missouri.
Well, this is where that grand jury of 12 members of the public are making their deliberations. There's been so much scrutiny on the prosecutor and his links to the police, but also the makeup of the jury, which is majority white. And that's because research has shown very different views generally from white Americans and black Americans in terms of this case.
Well, there you go, folks. We're just about to go out to the break. Stay tuned, because we'll be coming back right after the break, and you don't want to miss Gerald Celente right here on the Kev Baker Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after these short messages. And tonight, right after Joe Joseph's show, Popeye will be going live.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Stand tall in the face of tyranny. I want it all my freedom and liberty. I'll keep my guns, you can keep your security. I'll stand tall in the face of tyranny. I'll stand tall in the face of tyranny. I want it all my freedom and liberty. I'll keep my guns, you can keep your security. I'll stand tall in the face of tyranny.
I want to welcome everyone back to tonight's special broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on your favourite alternative media network, www.truthfrequencyradio.com. I keep saying it all the time, but wherever you are, you better be making it TFR. We really are on the rise right now, folks, and it's due to that rise and to all you listeners out there that we're able to ask people like our following guest onto the show. So, less from me. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gerald Celente. Okay, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to say that we're joined by Mr. Gerald Celente. Now, Mr. Gerald Celente is the publisher of the world-renowned Trends Journal, and you can find his work over at trendsresearch.com. Mr. Celente, a big, huge, warm welcome to the Kev Baker Show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, I had the privilege of reading over your latest Trends Journal. Now, in there, I see you were actually talking about Obama at great length. Now, you were saying that he's possibly going to lead America into World War III. What do you mean by that, Gerald?
Well, you can see the steps that they've been taking. Let's not forget, this is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. The man that unilaterally started the Libyan war. They call it a humanitarian mission. They overthrew a government, a sovereign government. And when you look now, we're back in Iraq under the guise of another humanitarian mission. We got to save those Yazidis on the mountain. Everybody knows what a Yazidi is and how precious they are. And, of course, the Christians on the mountain. But when the Christians in ancient Syrian villages were getting slaughtered, that was okay. But now we got to get ISIS, because ISIS is doing it. And then, of course, anybody that has the desire, the will, or the courage, all they have to go is onto YouTube and type in the name Victoria Nuland, N-U-L-A-N-D, December 13th, 2013, and there she is, our Assistant Secretary of State at the National Press Club in Washington, brought to you by, over her left shoulder, Chevron, over her right shoulder, Exxon, talking about why the path for Ukraine is with Europe and why Ukraine should follow the path set forth by the International Monetary Federation. Now, here's the American Secretary of State also caught on audio tape with the ambassador, American ambassador to Ukraine in February of 2014, Jeffrey Pyatt, talking about the overthrow and how they were going to do it of the Yanukovych government of Ukraine. So now you have Obama and the American media and most of the Western media condemning Russia for what the United States and NATO have transpired, have invented, have initiated, and they're blaming Russia for the destabilization, and it's working. Because the latest polls out show that Putin is the greatest threat to the world equity markets, and ISIS comes in second, and then bringing up a far third is Ebola.
And the thing is, over here in the UK, Mr. Celente, we're told every second day about Russian bombers all over Europe, yet they never mention the fact that it was NATO encroaching on Russia's western front, basically, that started all this. And then you can go back even to Syria, where Putin was a stumbling block for the actual failed chemical attack, blamed on it was Assad's forces, but it turned out to be probably the guys we now know as ISIS. Are they determined to get a war going with Russia?
They're psychopaths, and nobody wants to call them what they are. Look at these people. How many more wars do they have to start? How many more people do they have to kill before people will call them who they are? I mean, you remember you had Cameron shooting his mouth off about how Gaddafi has to go. You had Blair over there shooting his mouth off about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. You had Sarkozy starting the Libyan war, and Hollande now trumping it up in Syria, and now they're all back into Iraq. So what we're looking at, while we're saying Obama has this way about him, as psychopaths do, to be very calm and very collected while they're doing the con job. Again, how many more people do Americans and the Europeans have to slaughter before they call it murder? And going back, to the other issues that you were mentioning about the reaction of Russia from NATO's encroachment. People have, attention deficit disorder. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the deal was clear as day, etched in stone, that the Soviets would give Eastern Germany back to Germany. And as the agreement for that, NATO would not expand any further than it was. And then Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, he broached that one, and he started pushing further and further into Eastern Europe. And then little Georgie Bush kept it going. So now you have U.S. flights, military flights in Estonia. I mean, could you imagine if the Russians were in Canada and Mexico? Hey, how about the Cuban Missile Crisis? But no, it's okay for the Europeans to go into what was formerly Russian territory. So when you're talking about Ukraine and how the way Putin's reacting, and here's the thing, Kevin, John, that blow me away. What imbecile that has a brain between their ears thinks that little boy Cameron, baby cakes Hollande, or BS Obama is going to beat the Russians? If Napoleon couldn't pull it off, if Hitler, who launched the greatest military offensive in world history, couldn't pull it off, how could a bunch of military losers who can't win in Afghanistan, who can't win in Iraq, and who can't win in Libya going to beat the Russians?
Well, Gerald, obviously Putin getting the blame for everything, and we've had the White House press lackeys tell us that separatists fired the rocket at MH17, even citing YouTube videos as evidence, which is amazing. But the British press at the time, they were going absolutely tonto and coming up with headlines like, Putin killed my son. Now, Russia's just released satellite images, allegedly, of a Ukrainian jet firing a missile. So what's your take on this latest evidence, if true, would shut this lot up for a while?
Where's the evidence from the United States? They're watching everything that everybody does, and they can't come up with any footage of or satellite images of this? That's what it'll take. And they're not doing it. Again, I remember how this whole thing unfolded. I remember the day very well, because it was the same day that the other mass murderers, Israel, launched the attack against Gaza. So while the media was focused on the downing of the Malaysian airliner over Ukraine, Netanyahu launched the attack against Gaza. And that didn't hardly made the news until probably it started generating news about a week and a half later. So he used that as a cover-up. But immediately we heard from the American vice president, we heard from the American media and the Western media, that Russian separatists shot it down without one bit of proof. Just like what Kev was saying about the reports coming in about, Russian tanks and Russian this inside of Ukraine. And in this age of selfies, how about showing me some photos? No, we can't show you any because that's intelligence. Yeah, we'd be giving up our intelligence. Yeah, you have to have no intelligence to believe they're crap. So it is all one big lie. Don't forget, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. Hey, remember that Gulf of Tonkin incident that started the Vietnam War that never happened? I smoked, but I didn't inhale. I didn't have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. Why would anybody believe they're crap?
And that's the thing, Mr. Celente, because last year, when Obama tried to get boots on the ground and go into Syria the first time, it didn't happen. Yet you add in the Yazidis, and now I read it, 73% of Americans actually approve of boots on the ground and more intervention in the Middle East. And it's the same over here in the UK. We've been told it's ISIS this and ISIS that. Do you feel that probably right about now is a very, very strong likelihood we're going to see some kind of false flag to justify further encroachment into Syria?
I would say yes. And not only further encroachment into Syria, but more cause for war. That's all they do, is they keep promoting war, whether false flag or real. Again, I mentioned the lies of the other ones, whether it was, and going back to Remember the Maine. So, yes, I believe that's what's going to happen. And as you well point out, the people buy it real quick. In the last Trends Journal, the spring edition, I wrote a story, the summer edition rather. I did a story about George Bush's 9/11 speech and the one 9 days later when he took us to war against Afghanistan. And I began it by saying, only a madman would speak these words, and only a nation dumbstruck with fear would believe them. And dumbstruck they were, because 90% of the American public bought the Afghan lie. I broke down his speech, sentence by sentence. Not one fact in it. Not one. Even a phrase going back to 2001. And a man by the name of Osama bin Laden. A man by the name of, And all of a sudden he became public enemy number one. So the people are very easily led with propaganda, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Pakistan or Russia, you name the country. Propaganda is a good business to get into. You could do it cheaply and get great results.
And our man over here right now, Moron, as I call him, he's actually shouting about he's worried another financial collapse is on the way. Now, with these markets being so rigged, Mr. Celente, surely they know when the next big collapse is coming. But how do we go about eradicating somewhere like the City of London? We see these LIBOR cases and the latest one about setting interest for currency exchanges. They were fined something like £1 billion. But when you actually look at how much trade they make on the foreign currency desk each day, it's something like $3 trillion. How do you actually go about punishing these people?
Well, actually, it's 5.3 trillion.
Wow.
Yeah, and what it is that there's no consequences for actions anymore. They say that the fish rots from the head down. And what we were talking about, the actions of the psychopaths in chief, be they presidents, prime ministers, or chancellors, the people mimic what goes on at the top. That's why they get the saying, the fish rots from the head down. And the financial markets are just another aspect of that, because no longer is there a threat that if you're caught for stealing literally trillions of dollars worth of money, that the consequences are going to be any more than a minimum fine, like you pointed out. That, compared to doing $5.3 trillion a day, and I think the fine was 3.2 trillion, which is, of course, probably about $1.5 billion, 2 billion euros. That's no consequence at all. So there is no punishment for crimes. The only people in fascist dictatorships that we have now, and I don't say that, by the way, to be inflammatory or to be confrontational. I say it as a matter of fact, because fascism is the merger of state and corporate powers, and too big to fail killed capitalism, if there ever was one that killed it. But anyway, under these systems, it's only we the people that pay the price for breaking the minor letter of the law, not dotting an I of it or crossing a T, while the big criminals like the Tony Blairs, the George Bushes, who start wars based on lies, they get look at multimillionaire Blair now. Maybe he'll become billionaire Blair. That's how he's rewarded. So in the system of corruption, from the fish rotting from the head down, that's what you're going to see more of. We're coming out with our top trends for 2015. Today, I had a conversation with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, there's no one that I respect more for geopolitical and economic insights than him. And he was the former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan. This is a guy that could and did bring in the director of the CIA and question him under oath. We were talking today, he's going to be penning one of the top trends for 2015. And it's going to be about the economy. And you alluded to it earlier when you said about rigging the LIBOR and rigging the Forex. The entire, and why isn't it crashing? How can they keep it going? Do they know it's going to fail? The entire system is rigged. How much more proof do people need? The proof is there that the LIBOR, their interest rates, to the tune of, by the way, since they found out they were rigging them, it's about $700 trillion. The LIBOR is rigged. Gold markets are rigged. I mean, all of a sudden, 3 a.m. in the morning, there's 40,000 shares of, paper gold being sold at a loss. So they're rigging the markets. And think of how easy it is to rig. If George Soros could destroy the pound as he did back then, and that was one man, imagine the central banks working in collusion. So the whole game is rigged. And going back to your first question, they're leading us to war, because that's what happens when all else fails. They take you to war. And the economies have failed. Europe is in a recession by all measurements. Even even using the fake measurements that the ECB and the European Union put out. They're teetering on it depending what country you're looking at. You look at what's going on in Japan. They just announced that Japan is in a recession. Now, under Abenomics, he dumped the equivalent of 4 times the amount of money that the Federal Reserve dumped in quantitative easing to bail out the United States system in relation to GDPs, ratio to GDPs, as the United States did, and they're in a recession. And now he's upping it by another 60%. So who's benefiting from all this? It's very simple. Again, I'm not making up the numbers. 85 people in the world have as much dough as 3.5 billion people. 85 has as much as half the world's population. That's what the equity markets are doing. That's what all this quantitative easing has accomplished. That's what austerity measures have brought. That's their payoff. They steal from all of us and give to the banks that are nothing more than casinos that gamble. And one of our other top trends for 2015 is going to be bankism, not capitalism. And Nomi Prinz is penning that one. And she's well known for her books on the banking system and the corruption within it.
Sorry, Ken, I was just going to say, how do you fix something that even if the big fish lost its head, it would just grow another one and carry on the same way?
I think the model to look at, the one that I see that only works, is the Swiss model of direct democracy. And, they have referendums on issues that the people get enough votes for and enough signatures for, and they put them up for a referendum. And the argument that, well, that's a small country. It doesn't make any difference. 11 people or 111 million people. 11 million or 100, it doesn't make any difference. You're voting on one issue. And if you could bank online, you could vote online. And people say, yeah, but the voting online could be corrupted. Yeah, like it isn't corrupted now. And I would say that it has a better opportunity of not being corrupted if it's open to all public scrutiny. So that you have the greatest geeks watching the algorithms and whatever kind of information is coming out to see in each state, province, wherever, if it's in sync with reality. So for me, what we're doing along those lines, to answer your question, how do you change it? On May 2nd, 2011, we're launching Occupy Peace. And the website's occupypeace.us. This is just a United States initiative. Anybody that wants to do it in their country, knock yourself out. Yeah. But the way we look at it is that we honor thy founding fathers. And each of them, beginning with Washington, a real commander-in-chief, not like this little boy Cameron or Hollande or Obama that couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. This is the guy that led the troops. His farewell address was no foreign entanglements. Benjamin Franklin, no foreign entanglements. Adams, no foreign entanglements. Jefferson, no foreign entanglements. Adams, no foreign entanglements. And the world was at war back then. So what we're doing with Occupy Peace, other than other rallies, we're going to have takeaways with this. And one of them is going to be a move toward direct democracy. So that any time the nation goes to war and Congress has to vote on it, we'll tell our congressmen in each state the way we, the people, want them to vote. And we want to get referendums on each state ballot to make that possible. And we're calling them Proposition Peace ballots. So to me, the answer is you have to break the two-headed one-party systems. There's no difference between the Conservatives and Labor Party. There's no difference between Republicans and Democrats. There's no difference between the Bloods and the Crypts. They're all murderers and thieves. They steal your money in the name of austerity or too big to fail or tax breaks for their buddies, and they kill millions in the name of freedom, democracy, and humanitarian missions.
So looking forward to 2016, Gerald, who do you think is going to be the new teleprompter in chief? Will it be Hitlery or will it be Jeb Bush?
The way it looks now, it's Hitlery. And here's the way I see it lining up. And again, anything could happen, you know, but the way things are now, at this moment, I would say the wild card in this is going to be Rand Paul. And with Rand Paul, it will be very reminiscent to 1992, when Bill Clinton ran against Papa Bush, and Ross Perot was the wild card. Ross Perot got almost 20% of the vote, and he dragged that vote away from George Bush. Rand Paul will drag it away from Jeb Bush if he runs on a third ticket. And Rand Paul doesn't, at this point, doesn't have a shot because of and the same reason his father didn't. It's the abortion issue. You know, you have these guys telling other people what they should do with their bodies, and that's offensive to a lot of women, particularly. And issues like that and the drug issues are going to be real big negatives for him. And besides that, he's a two-faced little boy, a guy born on third base and thought he hit a triple. This is a guy that came out and said, no more foreign aid for Israel. Until AIPAC, he couldn't take the hot air from AIPAC. Little Randy crumbled, man. Okay, no foreign aid except for Israel. Another coward. They're cowards. There's not a man or a woman among them. So it looks like more of the same. The dynasty keeps going on. But again, anything could happen between now and then. You know, we could see an internet candidate pop up, and that could well happen. So the field is wide open. By the way, we had midterm elections here in the States, as you know. 36% of the people turned out. Well, otherwise, 74% of the people stayed home. Didn't want to be a part of a charade.
That's exactly what it is, Mr. Celente, and I want to thank you for your time tonight. And you know, the Americans maybe could do a lot worse than a Gerald Celente running for president over there. I tell you that.
I'll go for that.
Exactly, you seem to have your head screwed on, Mr. Celente. Again, I want to thank you for joining the Kev Baker Show, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime in the future, sir.
I would love to. Thank you so much, and thank you for all that you're doing.
And thank all of you out there for listening to that interview. I hope you enjoyed that. Mr. Celente will be coming back soon. And wherever you are, keep it TFR.
You didn't touch that dial.
Peace! And great interview, by the way.
And stay tuned for Joe Joseph and Paul.
Seeking answers to age-old questions, deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. A big, huge, massive warm welcome to this, the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning edition of the Kev Baker Show. Right here on your favourite network, www.truthfrequencyradio.com. It's an absolute pleasure to be broadcasting to all you fine people out there tonight. And tonight we have got one of our most special shows lined up yet. But before we get there, it wouldn't be any show at all without my two regular co-hosts and buddies, Johnny Whistles and Big Martin Hardy. I'm going to come to you first, Whistles. How are you doing, man? And I know you're uber excited about tonight's guest.
Ah, no wonder, Kev. You know what I mean? I can remember way back at the start when I was joking to you to get him on as a guest, and wow, just fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. And before we get to that, if people don't know, I'm going to go to Marty Boy to do the honours in the chat. But before we go to the chat, Marty, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing great, guys. Just Can't wait to hear this next half of the show.
Excellent. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to even the first half of the show as well, because there's been so much going on in the world. We had been expecting the Ukraine boy, Alex, to come on, and I really hope Alex is okay, because that country is slipping into bedlam more and more every day. So a big shout out to Alex and anyone over in the Ukraine right now. We are all thinking of you. You're all victims of a globalist overthrow of a democratically elected government. And I was hoping we could have Alex on to speak about this tonight. But we'll get him on as soon as we can, and he'll bring us right up to date with the real news that's coming out of Kiev. And in the second half of the show, our guest will be kind of angling his talk towards what's going on over there. But Marty, we can't go anywhere until you've done the chat room, man.
Yeah, thanks very much. Big shout out to everyone in the chat room tonight and further afield, whether you're there or not. If you're not, come and join us at truefrequencyradio.com. 50 people so far. Shout out to Naughty Boy, Alpha Dog, Andy, Angel Whisperism, Ozzy and Zach, Cheryl, Cows in Nappies, David GK, Denin Oldham, our very own Popeye, Flower Child, Harold, Ivy Nurse, Kevin John, Chris, McGrinder, Miss Susie Q, Mitty Boosh, Nosboy, Noteworthy Icon, Sofa King, Stushi, the one and only Temp, Truth Samurai, Wandinator, Dr. Haruwino, a load of fan, Jujusif, Ibrahim, and a whole host of anons. Couple of plants in there, nearly caught me out. Nice try.
Excellent. And Marty, can I just get you to hang up and I'll reconnect quickly, because I think you're actually hosting the call at the moment, just so we get that uber good connection from my end, okay? So if you could hang up, I'll reconnect right away. I think we might even have lost Marty. There we are. We are back, folks. Look at that. The joys of modern technology. A show this is going to be tonight. And in part 2 of this show, it gives me immense pleasure to announce that we are going to be playing a recorded interview that myself and John conducted yesterday with the publisher of the world-famous Trends Journal himself, Mr. Gerald Celente. Now, unfortunately, Marty, you couldn't actually be there for last night, but I've made sure that Mr. Celente is going to come on again in the future, and you certainly will get to speak to him as well, man.
Yeah, thanks very much. It will be a pleasure. Just can't wait to hear what he has to say, you know, and the whole context with you guys, it'll be something else.
And Marty, it's like Whistles says, we really did. Whistles used to say jokingly at the start, if we could get Gerald Celente, then we really know that we've arrived in the alternative media. And I've said it to you, Marty, and I've said it to Johnny Whistles. The moment we arrived in alternative media was when somehow Chris Geo seen fit to give us the chance to be on here in the first place. Spate of events that have been going on. Now, this has been blamed on 2 Palestinians who carried knives, axes. I believe 1 handgun was involved. One thing I do want to point out to the listeners out there, it's the usual story when it comes to the mainstream, folks. In the initial moments after this attack, we had both Sky News and it was the BBC reporting that there may be a 3rd gunman on the loose, a 3rd attacker. Now, this 3rd attacker miraculously just disappeared after about an hour or so in the mainstream cycle. And I'm wondering, just part of me just wonders if this could be some kind of set-up situation. And Marty, I want to come to you first, because we were talking before the show, and it really is. It's total insanity if this is Palestinians going and doing this and expecting anything other than all hell being released on their people.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, after what just happened a couple of months back there, it seems stupid, you know, to go out and commit acts like that, because, you know, how many kids are now going to have to die at the hands of airstrikes, you know, because of this sort of scenario, if it is a genuine scenario, what, you know. But I mean, it just doesn't help. It's just like war breeding war, you know. And I just don't believe that this is just your average Palestinian. If it is that, I think there's something deeper going on here. We're actually seeing all over the social media. And
it's only thanks to TFR, Chris Geo, Joe Joseph, Popeye, everyone else behind the scenes, and the listening audience out there, that we're able to go and ask for guests such as Celente come on and speak to you. But before we get there, let's get into this plethora of news that we have for you today. And unfortunately, folks, things in the Middle East have yet again taken a turn for the worst.
This was an attack that took place in the Har Nof area in the west of Jerusalem as there were worshippers going to a synagogue inside a Jewish seminary early in the morning. 2 Palestinian men entered, we understand, armed with knives, with an axe, shooting at those inside. 4 Israelis were killed. Israeli police then came. There was an exchange of fire with the Israeli police, and the 2 suspects were killed. The police have sealed off this area. Some still quite chaotic scenes there. A number of people have been injured and taken to hospital, including 2 police officers, we're told. And really, this is just going to add to the tensions in Jerusalem, which have been simmering for weeks now, with a few other attacks that have taken place in Jerusalem, in the east of the city, also in the West Bank, in Tel Aviv. A total of 6 Israelis killed by Palestinians in those. But this is really the deadliest attack that there has been in Jerusalem, the deadliest attack of its kind for many years.
So there you go, folks. What's happened is we had an attack at a synagogue in Jerusalem today. Just the latest event in a whole